Right, so time for another Dear Jane quilt block. This one is D13, which is the traditional square in a square. So this pattern has been drawn up by Susan Gatewood, and I will leave her blog in the description down below. I'm going to do it in green and cream. So cream is going to be in the centre and green is going to be on the outside. So I've just raided my scrap bin for some suitable fabric. It is possible to resize this block and do it multiple times in other quilts using exactly the method I'm going to describe. It's just that this one happens to be for my Dear Jane. So nice and easy. It's one of the easiest ones in the entire lot. First thing we do, as per always, is we don't do it with fabric scissors. You get paper scissors. Nearly did it with the fabric scissors there. And we're just going to roughly chop out the excess paper. Get it out of the way. You don't need it. And you see, I'm not being too neat. I'm just making sure that I'm at least a quarter of an inch away from the rest of it. That going good. Now I'm going to bring in a piece of card. This is has a straight edge here, so a postcard would be ideal. This happens to be from a piece of packaging, but anything that is a firm card, because you're going to use it to score where things are. So put it on the line, like there, and fold up. That's where my hands are in the way, and people are going to be telling me my hands are in the way, but yeah, that's what we're going to do. So on the line for all four of these. If you are attempting the Dear Jane and you've never done paper piecing before, this is the ideal block to be your first block, because the pieces are nice and large and there's only 5 of them, and it gets you into the rhythm of paper piecing without being super tiny, so that you get a chance to practice what the rhythm is before you need the accuracy. So there we go, all of those are folded. Now I've measured this square in the middle and I've cut or gathered a square that is at least a quarter of an inch bigger all the way around. I turn this over towards the back and position my fabric right side up, if it has one, over that, and I'm going to grab a pin, and the pin I'm going to put on the front. In fact, this is so big that I'm going to put a couple of pins in just to make sure that it stays nice and flat. The reason I put the pins on the front is because when I sew, I'm going to have the printed side upwards. I don't want this to be fluffing around and folding back on itself while I sew. Yeah. There we go. What we're going to do now is we're going to pick a corner, any corner. We fold it back, and I'm going to grab a ruler and a rotary cutter. Line the quarter of an inch of my ruler along the edge of the paper where I folded, and trim off that excess. Okay. So now I'm going to grab my scrap. Now my scrap has got a nice straight edge here. If it didn't, I would want to straighten that off. I'm going to line that up so that I'm sure when it is flipped back like so, I've got at least a quarter of an inch all the way around. That's a quarter of an inch from the printed shape. So again, line it up on the back, hold it in place, flip it to the front, and then I can put 1 or 2 pins in. By putting them on the front, it means that I'm going to be able to remove them as I sew if I need to. There we go. So that's my first piece in place. I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to sew from a quarter of an inch past this mark here all the way down the line, keeping the needle on the line, and then I'm going to finish 1/4 of an inch past this point here. So here we go. I'm just going to do a little sneaky peek to make sure that nothing is actually folded up on me and everything is flat behind, which it is. I'm then going to use the gap in the middle of my foot to line up along that line. Put the needle, and then we should be able to sew on the line all the way to the end. Now that might be interfering with the foot, so I can take that out. So now I've got my first 3 stitches in. And again, I can move that pin if I think that's going to interfere. So much easier than rummaging around underneath when you're halfway down the seam. And I just sew a little bit past that point. That's it, that's my first seam done. Okay, so you can see I started here, just a little bit past that one. And I've gone down to here, just a little bit past that one. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the iron and I'm going to press that flat. Okay, I can hold it up and make sure that I've got coverage, because I can see, when I hold it up to the light, I can see where the printed outline is, and I want to go at least 1/4 of an inch further than that, and I've definitely got that. Once that is pressed, I'm going to go back to the cutting table and position it for my next corner in the same way I did the first one. So here we are, that's nicely pressed. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the one that's opposite it. Although in theory I could just choose any corner, it wouldn't actually matter that much. Okay, so fold it down just like we did before. 1/4 of an inch on the fold and trim. It's a seam allowance. It doesn't have to be super accurate, but it's got to be at least 1/4 of an inch. Get my scrap, position it on the back, hold it in place, flip to the front, and put a couple of pins in. And then we're going to go to the sewing machine in the same way we did for piece 1. We're going to iron it in the same way, and then we're going to come back here and we're going to trim and put on the next one, and so on and so on and so on. It is just repeating the same stages. So if you've got to this point, you can do the whole thing. I'm going to take this pin out because that's not necessary. No, I don't think. There we go. Best chance of jabbing it in my finger. So I've done piece 1, I've positioned piece 2. I'll meet you back here after I've done piece 3 and 4. So here we are, all 4 of my corners have been added on, and we are on the last stretch. We're going to turn it over to the printed side. Take a ruler, put your 1/4 of an inch on the outside printed line. Come on, there we go. Paper's not the slipperiest fabric, obviously. There we go. Right. And trim through the paper and the fabric. All 4 sides, and that will be finished. And there we go. There is my quilt block, all done. Now, there is one more step that I like to do. because we've got some seams that go right the way to the edge here, and it's going to be years before my Dear Jane quilt is finished, what I want to do is I want to do a line of stay stitching in the seam allowance. So I'm going to give one more line of stitching all the way around, all four sides, in the middle of where that seam allowance is. As I say, this is optional, but I don't want to have done all of them and then find they've stretched. And so there we are. This now really is the end. That little bit of stay stitching will make it more stable when it's handled over who knows how long. But that is it. Block number D13. All signed, sealed and delivered. Thank you for spending time with me.